Welcome back to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson. We're talking about security, privacy. Some of the aspects, of course, are in the news right now as we've had the government sending out some requests via the court system, their own private secret courts, I might add, but that's a subject for a different show. And they have been monitoring things like phone calls. Now, they say, well, it's just Verizon. Well, of course, it's probably not just Verizon. And they talk about, well, it's just the metadata. So we want to talk about what that all means. But we want to talk about privacy in a bigger context. Many people say, well, I'm not worried about it because I have nothing to hide. Well, there are a lot of people you probably do want to hide some of your information from out there. There's the Russian mafia who has been breaking into our computers. We have other countries who have incredible cyber programs, China included, and many others. So many years ago, way back when, in fact, back in the days when, this is before the internet, back in the 1980s, I started messing around with some different encryption software to try and keep information private because I knew there were a lot of people watching. Back then, of course, the net was very, very open. Well, we're going to talk with someone who has been out on the internet for years, who has been a very big privacy advocate. In fact, he is the author of some software that you might have heard of before, PGP. I've used that for many years. Z-Phone as well, which is a voice over IP standard for encrypting communications. And nowadays, he is very busy here as a co-founder and president of Silent Circle. And I've been watching them for about a year and a half. They've come out with a full suite of communications tools that you can use with things like cell phones and email, et cetera, et cetera. Governments using it and businesses using it as well. So the big question is why? What do you need to know? What should you know? And Phil Zimmermann, welcome back, because I think you were on once before to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson.
Hello, Craig. My pleasure to be here.
Well, there is a real big concern that people now have in their consciousness that they have to be kind of careful with communications. We've had businesses who have had information stolen from them. And many people think, well, why would anybody care about my widget? Why would anybody care about my communications? What's the answer to that, Phil?
Well, we all have our personal lives. We all have our medical records, our taxes, our love letters. We all have something to hide. Without privacy, there's a lot of other problems that happen. Now, if you don't have any privacy, you can't engage in political discourse safely, at least in some countries, maybe even this one. You can't safely talk with your doctor about your medical conditions. There's always something to hide.
Yeah, and keeping it private, I think, is an important thing.
Personal life. Yeah,
well,
everybody has a personal life.
Right, and again, we could go into a lot of things that have happened recently when we talk about Elliot Spitzer and General Petraeus, and where did those emails come from? Where did they pop up from?
But, also on the business side, we have plenty to hide there. We have trade secrets. We have business plans, business activities that we want to shield from our competitors. Businesses have plenty of things that they need to keep secure. In fact, you have a legal obligation to keep it secure if you're a publicly traded company. You have a responsibility to your shareholders to protect your company assets. Back in the 90s, when PGP first came out, you had to explain yourself if you were using strong crypto. People would look at you with suspicion and say, what are you trying to hide? Are you a criminal? But now the legal environment has changed completely in the other direction. Now, if you don't use strong crypto, you have to explain yourself. If you are a doctor with patient records and you don't encrypt them, then you may be liable under HIPAA laws. If you're a business and you leave your laptop computer in a taxi with 200,000 customer identities on the disk, if you don't have that encrypted, then you're in trouble. You have to disclose this breach has occurred. which is damaging to your company. In fact, in Europe, not only do you have to disclose it, you may be liable to civil and criminal liability. So, the legal environment for cryptography has changed since the 90s. Now you're expected to use strong crypto.
And again, depending on the business you're in, you may have legal requirements, as you mentioned, but frankly, I think pretty much everyone has to be concerned nowadays. There is a lot of industrial espionage going on. It's a real big deal. It's very scary. Phil Zimmermann is our guest. He's president and co-founder of Silent Circle. Now, you'll find them online at silentcircle.com. You'll also find some of his software available online. He just mentioned PGP that he had written many years ago and helped design it. In fact, it has been one of the top pieces of software for encryption for many, many years, and for some very good reasons. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the website. I'll pull up the Silent Circle website here for you as well here on my screen. So, Phil, businesses have to be concerned as well because of the industrial espionage aspect of data gathering. We have nation states now, and China's one that I think most people will agree has been using its abilities to try and break in to just regular corporate computers here so that they can get all kinds of industrial information as well.
Yeah. If you're a traveler, if you're a businessman traveling to China, then every phone call you make back to your corporate headquarters is going to be monitored by the Chinese. Any kind of electronic communications, your internet, your email going back to your company is going to be intercepted. Unless you use encryption, you're not going to be safe in communicating when you go to an aggressive wiretapping environment like China.
Well, and in this day and age, too, we're also seeing it in the coffee shops, or people are hacking into and jumping on computers, jumping in over a VPN into a corporate network. Frankly, it's a very scary world out there, and that's where you've been helping out, too, Phil, for many, many years. So let's talk about that part of it here. We've got the Prism program that we've been talking about on the show, and I've been all over radio lately, all over New England, in fact, talking about what the federal government's been doing with their espionage. Should a standard everyday person be concerned about what Prism is, or again, is it something that they're not really going to pay much attention to me?
Well, I think we all have to be concerned about Prism. The collection of all of the call records of every American is troublesome. It means that the government can keep track of who you're talking to. When you talk to them, they can make inferences about your activities just based on who you associate with. Maybe you're calling someone that you would prefer others not know that you're calling them. Maybe it would be socially embarrassing for you to have it disclosed that you're communicating with someone that could cause disruption in your life if others knew about it. The government is collecting all that kind of metadata. They say that they're not collecting the content of the calls, but they say that they're only collecting the data about who you're calling, when you're calling them, how long you speak to them. That's, without the content, that's still rather Orwellian to be doing it on such a large scale. They're not just doing it to go after a single criminal under a court order. They're doing it to all of us. And, even if you think that the politicians that created this technology and this surveillance infrastructure in the past decade, even if you think that they were all honorable and wise and use good judgment and are incorruptible, both in the Bush and the Obama administration, if you think that doesn't really reassure me very much, because we don't know who's going to be president in 2017. We don't know if they might turn this kind of surveillance apparatus against us. It's only a matter of policy, not a matter of law. They could change the policies overnight. And, you know, there's a lot of dictators that would love to have this kind of infrastructure. It can turn into a sort of turnkey tyranny.
And when we're talking about having the bad guys out there who are trying to get at our information, what better place to go than Prism? Attack them, attack the NSA, get all of that data. Boy, what a windfall that would be. We're speaking with Phil Zimmermann, president and co-founder of Silent Circle. We're talking about our privacy. We're talking about what we might want to do about it and if we should be concerned about it. And it certainly sounds like we should. Now, we've got about 5 minutes left here in this segment, Phil. PGP, it stands for Pretty Good Privacy. It is now a company of its own. It has a number of commercial products. And what are we talking about here? You mentioned earlier high-grade encryption. What does that all mean?
Well, PGP is actually now owned by a much larger software company, Symantec. Symantec makes antivirus software, various kinds of security software. They acquired PGP in 2010. So I don't really have much to do anymore with PGP. But
it was the start.
It was, yeah. In 1991 is when I first published it. At that time, there was no good, strong encryption available. And now, strong encryption is found everywhere. Every web browser has strong encryption. When you do your online banking, you're using strong encryption.
And now you also are moving some of this strong encryption to all of the channels that we use for communications. And that's what Silent Circle's about.
Yes. I mean, for example, secure telephony. I've been wanting to do secure telephony for a long time. Even before secure email, I wanted to do secure telephony. But the technology infrastructure wasn't ready yet. No one had broadband back in the 90s. But now they do. So, you know, voice over IP is now the manifest destiny of all of telephony. Mm-hmm. So I feel that we're going to have to encrypt our voice over IP phone calls. Maybe we didn't have to encrypt the old-fashioned phone calls, the traditional phone calls over the public switch telephone network that we've been doing for more than 100 years. But as we move it onto the Internet, we're going to have to encrypt it. Because if we don't, it's going to be intercepted by organized crime, by foreign governments, by our own government, by just criminals. And, you know, whereas it used to be that we mostly had to worry about wiretaps from the government, now, as we move our phone calls to the Internet, we got to worry about wiretaps from everyone. Being criminal.
Yeah, and frankly, that's what the whole 4G LTE is about. Your phone calls, even though they're not moving over the Internet for the most part, it's using voice over IP technology. So it really scares me when I think about this. And all of our calls are pretty much in the clear. Actually, I'm sorry, Phil, we're safe. I forgot, because the Electronic Communications Privacy Act makes it illegal to intercept those calls. So we probably don't have anything to worry about.
Yes, I'm sure that will protect us. No, our company was started, my business partner is a former Navy SEAL, and he approached me about a year and a half ago and asked about forming a company to make things that would protect U.S. servicemen serving overseas that wanted to call their families at home while they were deployed. And that sounded like a good idea to me. And so we started expanding it from there and using it for other markets as well. But we've managed to capture a significant fraction of the government market. Our stuff is now being used by intelligence agencies. It's used by Navy SEALs. It's used by special forces, of other kinds of special forces in the U.S. It's used by the British Special Forces and by the British government. It's used by the Canadian Special Forces. Now, PGP also got used by all the major governments around the world, but that took years to achieve. But now we're penetrating the government market so much faster, to a large extent because my partner is a former Navy SEAL. So we're also going after the financial industry, the Fortune 100 companies, enterprise customers, human rights groups, people, journalists who are working in dangerous environments that are exposing corruption in African countries, for example, domestic U.S. journalists that are trying to protect their sources. You remember recently we had the big revelations about the Associated Press having their phone records collected by the U.S. government.
Right, and Fox News and more. It's quite scary. We have to take a break here. We're speaking with Phil Zimmermann. He's president and co-founder of Silent Circle. You'll find them online, of course, at silentcircle.com. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about their offerings, what they're doing. They have some specials. We'll talk about what that is and a little bit behind the technology, too, so you can understand how do you use this when we're talking about communications. You're listening to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson. Stick around because we'll be right back.